What happens when a school bully thinks he can intimidate the new principal, only to find out she's more powerful than he ever imagined? Marcus Hayes stepped into the sunlit hall of St. Mark's High School for the first time as the officially appointed principal, his black suit crisp, his tie straight, and his calm eyes observing every detail of the building he was now responsible for. The students whispered and glanced curiously at him, sensing a quiet strength, a presence that demanded respect without shouting, and for a moment, Marcus allowed himself a breath of pride. But the moment was shattered when David Thornton, a senior teacher notorious for his dismissive attitude, stepped forward with a smirk, clearly testing boundaries, thinking Marcus was just another inexperienced administrator he could bully. "So, you're the new principal, huh?" David said, voice dripping with mockery, arms crossed, packing as if the entire school belonged to him. Marcus met his gaze steadily, his lips pressed in a calm line, feeling the weight of both history and expectation on his shoulders, knowing that every word he said now would matter. He had faced discrimination before, subtle and overt, and he knew that this was no different, a man trying to assert dominance over someone he assumed was weaker. Marcus spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Yes, I am, and I intend to make this school a safe and fair place for everyone." The air seemed to thicken, the tension in the hall almost tangible, as students shifted uneasily, sensing the collision of authority and arrogance. David laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound, clearly underestimating Marcus's quiet intensity. "Safe and fair. Let's see how long that lasts with people like me around," he sneered, stepping closer, thinking intimidation would force Marcus to falter. But Marcus did not flinch, did not raise his voice, simply held the man's gaze, and in that moment the students noticed something remarkable: confidence, integrity, and a calm strength that no mockery could shake. David's smirk faltered slightly, though he tried to hide it behind a forced chuckle, realizing perhaps this principal was unlike any he had dealt with before. Marcus's presence alone commanded attention, and he felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried him through every obstacle in life, a determination rooted in dignity, respect, and an unwavering belief that justice could not be ignored. The hall seemed to hum with anticipation, students whispering, watching, learning that respect was not given by fear, but by standing firm, by facing bullies without letting them define your worth. Marcus finally straightened his shoulders, took a slow step forward, and said firmly, "We will follow the rules, we will respect each other, and no one, regardless of position, will bully anyone here." The words hung in the air, clear and powerful, and for a moment, even David Thornton felt a chill of realization that his assumptions about power and control had just been challenged. Marcus's heart raced, but his face remained calm, eyes scanning the hall to see the students nod subtly, their faith quietly restored. He knew this was only the beginning, a battle that would test patience, courage, and his ability to stand firm against prejudice. And as he glanced at the students' eager, hopeful faces, Marcus whispered to himself, "This school will be different. I will not let fear rule here." Subscribe to follow Marcus's journey and comment, "Respect," if you believe no one should ever be bullied. Marcus Hayes adjusted his tie and braced himself, knowing that David Thornton's challenge was only the beginning of a storm he had to face. The sunlight streaming through the school windows highlighted every polished corner, but it could not illuminate the tension brewing in the hall, a tension Marcus felt in every fiber of his being. David smirked, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, attempting to radiate superiority, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he muttered, "Let's see if you can really handle this place." Marcus met his gaze steadily, unwavering, knowing that fear and intimidation had no place in his leadership, and that every student watching depended on him to set the tone. He had encountered prejudice before, subtle jabs and dismissive stares, and he knew that handling this would require patience, strategy, and the quiet power of authority grounded in justice. Students whispered among themselves, some biting their lips in anticipation, others exchanging glances that betrayed hope, sensing that Marcus was not ordinary, sensing that today the rules of respect were being rewritten. Marcus took a slow step forward, his voice calm but carrying weight. "This school thrives when everyone is treated with fairness. Intimidation ends now." David's eyes narrowed, attempting to mask surprise, but Marcus could see the momentary doubt flicker across his face, a crack in the armor of arrogance. Marcus continued, walking slowly down the hall, acknowledging nods from students, each movement deliberate, each step reinforcing that authority did not come from cruelty, but from integrity. David stepped closer, trying to force a confrontation, but Marcus stopped, raising a hand slightly in a gesture that demanded attention without aggression. We lead by example. Disrespect will not be tolerated here. The hall fell silent, every whisper fading as the weight of Marcus's words sank in. Students leaned forward subtly, eyes bright, realizing that the principle they feared might be a force to challenge injustice was instead a beacon of strength and fairness. David's forced smile wavered, his smirk fading as he realized that this principle was not just firm but unshakable, and that his attempts at mockery were meaningless against someone whose confidence stemmed from years of overcoming prejudice, proving worth through action and dignity. Marcus's heart remained steady, though adrenaline coursed quietly beneath the surface, knowing that leadership demanded courage and vision, that respect must be earned through example and reinforced with decisive action. He paused, scanning the hall one last time, his eyes meeting those of the students who watched, who learned, who already began to understand that standing firm in the face of arrogance was itself a lesson they would carry far beyond these walls. David finally took a hesitant step back, muttering under his breath as he realized the game had changed, that the power he thought he had was no match for quiet authority backed by experience, resolve, and integrity. Marcus allowed himself a small, subtle nod, acknowledging the silent respect of the hall, knowing this victory was just the first of many battles he would face, each shaping the school into a place where courage, fairness, and equality would prevail. Subscribe to follow Marcus's journey and comment, "Courage, if you believe standing up to bullies is the true measure of leadership." Marcus Hayes watched David Thornton's uneasy shuffle as the hall settled into a tense silence, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but also a quiet satisfaction that the first challenge had been met without compromise. Students lingered at the edges of the hall, their eyes wide, sensing that the principal before them was unlike any authority they had encountered, calm yet commanding, firm yet fair, someone who would not bend under mockery or intimidation. David tried to regain his composure, muttering under his breath about rules and policies, but Marcus had already anticipated the play, and every step he took down the hall reinforced that he controlled the space with dignity, not fear. He paused near the main staircase, letting his gaze sweep across faces of students, teachers, and even staff who had watched the confrontation, noticing small nods, subtle expressions of approval, and the way whispers now carried awe instead of fear. Marcus knew this was only the beginning. David would push boundaries again, test limits, and attempt to belittle him in subtle ways. But today he had seen that courage and consistency could quiet arrogance without raising a hand in anger. He approached David directly, his voice calm but edged with authority. "You will adjust your attitude towards students and staff, and this includes your tone, your words, and your actions. We build respect here, not fear." David's jaw tightened as he realized that the smirk he wore was no shield. Marcus's unwavering gaze cut through it, exposing every hidden attempt at superiority. Students leaned closer, their eyes bright, absorbing the lesson unfolding in real time. True leadership was not in domination, but in setting boundaries and showing integrity. Marcus's mind reflected on the years he had faced prejudice, subtle undermining, and overt challenges, and he knew that every moment like this strengthened him, honed his ability to lead by example, and reminded those around him that actions always spoke louder than intimidation. Hours passed with small but deliberate interactions. Marcus walked the hallways, checked classrooms, and spoke to students and staff alike, each engagement reinforcing that fairness was non-negotiable, that bullying had no place under his leadership. David lingered at the sidelines, making occasional comments under his breath, but Marcus maintained his calm, authoritative presence, demonstrating that patience and clarity could dismantle arrogance just as powerfully as confrontation. By afternoon, whispers of admiration began to replace hushed comments of disbelief among students, who now saw the principal as a figure who embodied courage and fairness, someone who would protect them and guide them with integrity, someone who turned challenges into teaching moments without losing composure. As the final bell approached, Marcus paused at the doorway, scanning the hall one last time, feeling the subtle shift in energy as students gathered their belongings with heads held high and shoulders straight, inspired not by fear, but by the example set before them. David Thornton's smirk had completely vanished, replaced by a grudging respect he could neither voice nor hide. Marcus's heart remained steady, his calm demeanor untouched, knowing that today had been the first victory in a long journey to reshape the culture of the school. He whispered to himself, "Courage and fairness always leave a mark," and with a subtle nod to the students, he walked down the hall, confident that every challenge ahead would be met with the same unwavering integrity. Subscribe to follow Marcus's fight for justice in every hallway and comment, respect, if you believe standing firm is the true measure of leadership. Marcus Hayes stood at the front of the school hall the next morning, sunlight spilling through the windows and casting a warm glow across the rows of students and staff gathered to hear him speak, every eye fixed on him, every ear ready to absorb the lesson he carried. David Thornton lingered at the back, arms crossed, but the smirk that had once been his armor was gone, replaced by uncertainty, because he now understood that authority came from integrity, courage, and fairness rather than mockery and fear. Marcus's voice was calm, deliberate, and filled with conviction as he addressed the hall. Leadership is not measured by the ability to intimidate. It is measured by fairness, respect, and standing up for those who cannot always stand for themselves. The students shifted slightly, feeling the weight of his words, realizing that every action, every decision would now reflect these values, and even the staff nodded subtly in agreement, silently committing to support a culture of equality. He paused, letting the silence deepen, letting his presence reinforce the message, and continued, "We will face prejudice, arrogance, and challenges, but we meet them with patience, knowledge, and courage. We do not respond with anger, but with integrity." David tried to speak, but Marcus's calm, unwavering gaze made it clear that any attempt to undermine the rules would not succeed. The hall felt charged, electric, as students exchanged glances and internalized the lesson. Strength was measured by consistency, fairness, and the courage to do what was right even when it was difficult. Marcus stepped down from the podium, walking among them slowly, acknowledging nods, encouraging hesitant smiles, reinforcing that the school was now a place where dignity was non-negotiable. By the end of the assembly, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Students stood taller, teachers felt empowered to act justly, and even David Thornton's posture softened as he recognized that mockery and bullying would no longer define interactions in this hall. Marcus returned to his office, heart steady, a quiet satisfaction blooming within him, knowing that today marked the beginning of a cultural transformation, that every small victory built toward a safer, fairer, more respectful school environment. He whispered softly to himself, "Leadership is not about fear. It is about courage, fairness, and the lessons we leave behind." And the lesson for everyone became clear. Respect is earned, prejudice is challenged through integrity, and standing firm in the face of injustice creates a legacy that cannot be broken. Subscribe to follow Marcus's journey and comment, "Leadership," if you believe true power lies in fairness, courage, and standing up for what is right.